It was a quiet night on Earth when they arrived. The sky was clear, the stars shining brightly, and the world continued as it always did. Cities were alive with lights, cars moved through busy streets, and people sat in their homes watching television, unaware that everything was about to change. Then the sky lit up. Huge ships appeared above the Earth, covering the sky like massive shadows. They were dark, sleek, and unlike anything humans had ever seen before. These ships did not attack. They did not fire weapons. Instead, they hovered, silent and still, waiting. It did not take long for people to notice. News channels interrupted their broadcasts. The internet exploded with theories and panic. Governments held emergency meetings. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who were they? What did they want? Then came the message. It was not in a single language, but in every language known to Earth. It appeared on televisions, radios, and even on phone screens. The message was simple. We are the Zephyrians. We come in peace. Please stop. You must stop. Do not advance further. We beg you. The world was silent for a moment. People did not understand. Stop what? Stop where? Why were these beings, who clearly had the power to cross the stars, begging? The leaders of Earth did what leaders do. They gathered. The United Nations held an emergency meeting, and representatives from every powerful country sat together, discussing what to do next. Scientists were called, military forces were put on high alert, and everyone waited for more answers. A spaceship, smaller than the others, descended from the sky. It landed in a secure military base where world leaders were waiting. The ship opened, and from within came the Zephyrians. They were tall, with smooth silver skin that shimmered like liquid metal. Their eyes were large, black, and filled with something strange. Fear. One of them stepped forward and spoke. You must stop your progress. Your technology is moving too fast. If you do not stop, you will bring disaster upon yourselves. The leaders exchanged glances. The President of the United States leaned forward and asked, "What are you afraid of? We are not nearly as advanced as you. You travel the stars, but we are just beginning. What could we possibly do that worries you?" The Zephyrian leader shook his head. "It is not your weapons. It is not your war. It is your mind, your hunger for knowledge, your need to push beyond your limits. We have seen it before. Others have gone down this path, and they did not survive. We are trying to save you." The room fell silent. Some of the leaders listened with concern, others with doubt. Scientists whispered among themselves. Was it possible? Could advancing too fast be dangerous? But there were others who did not believe. A general stood up and crossed his arms. "Why should we listen? You claim to be more advanced, yet you fear us. If this was true, you would not need to beg. You would simply stop us." The Zephyrian leader's eyes darkened. "We do not wish to use force. We do not wish to harm you. But if you continue, you will reach something that cannot be stopped. We barely escaped it once. If you open that door, there is no closing it." "What door?" a scientist asked. "The door to the unknown," the Zephyrian replied. "To forces beyond understanding. You believe knowledge is endless, but some knowledge is a curse. You are not ready." Despite their words, many in the room did not believe them. Some called it a trick, others an attempt to slow down Earth's progress so that humans would never become a threat. Scientists wanted proof. The military wanted strategies. Governments wanted control. The world continued to listen, but the seeds of doubt had already been planted. Some would believe the Zephyrians, but many others would not. And soon, the greatest question of all arose. Would humanity stop, or would they continue forward, no matter the cost? The world did not stop. The world did not slow down. Instead, humanity pushed forward faster than ever before. After the Zephyrians' warning, people reacted in different ways. Some were afraid. They believed the aliens and wanted to listen. They thought humanity should stop its technological growth, but others refused to be controlled by fear. They saw the Zephyrin's words as a challenge. Why should humans stop? Why should they give up their progress just because an alien race was afraid? Governments held meetings, scientists debated. News channels talked about the warning every day. The world was divided. Some wanted to stop, but most did not. The leaders of powerful countries made a decision. Humanity would not stop advancing. Research and technology increased. Scientists worked harder than ever. The world's greatest minds gathered to create new inventions. Artificial intelligence became more advanced. Space travel became more common. Machines were faster, stronger, and smarter. The Zephyrians watched from their ships. They sent more messages. They begged, pleaded, and warned again. But humanity ignored them. One day, the Zephyrians requested another meeting. This time, they arrived not as diplomats, but as desperate beings trying to prevent a disaster. They met with world leaders in a secure location, hoping for one last chance to convince them. The Zephyrin leader spoke again. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed sadness. "You do not understand what you are doing," he said. "You believe you are moving toward a better future, but you are walking toward your own destruction." The President of the United States leaned back in his chair. "With all due respect, we have heard your warnings, but we have seen no proof. You say danger is coming, but we do not see it. Until we do, we will continue forward." The Zephyrin leader looked at him with sorrow. "You want proof. Proof does not come before disaster. Proof comes too late." A scientist at the meeting stood up. She was one of the most respected minds on Earth. "What exactly are you afraid of? You have traveled across the stars. You have greater knowledge than us. Tell us what will happen. Tell us what we are moving toward." The Zephyrin leader hesitated. Then he spoke in a quiet voice. "We have seen it before. Another species, much like yours, once existed. They were ambitious, intelligent, and always moving forward. They advanced quickly, just as you are doing now. One day, they discovered something they were not meant to find, something that does not belong in this universe. They thought they could control it, but they were wrong." The room was silent. "What happened to them?" a leader asked. The Zephyrin took a deep breath. "They are gone. Their entire civilization was erased. Their home planet no longer exists. It is not war that destroyed them. It is not an enemy. It is something much worse, something that cannot be fought, cannot be reasoned with, and cannot be stopped." The scientist frowned. "What did they discover?" "We do not know exactly what they found," the Zephyrin admitted, "but we know it had to do with the fabric of reality itself. The moment they opened the door, there was no turning back. Everything was lost." The leaders of Earth listened carefully. Some of them felt uneasy, but others still did not believe. "We are not afraid," a general said. "If we find something dangerous, we will handle it. That is what humans do. We survive, we fight, and we win." The Zephyrin leader looked at him sadly. "You believe you are strong, but strength will not help you here. Curiosity is your greatest power, but also your greatest weakness. If you do not stop, you will learn what we already know. Some doors should never be opened." But humanity did not listen. Weeks passed, then months. Technology continued to grow. Scientists made new discoveries every day. They found ways to manipulate energy in ways never seen before. They built machines that could bend the laws of nature. They even made progress toward understanding the deepest secrets of the universe. Then, something happened. A group of scientists, working in a hidden laboratory, made a breakthrough. They had been studying something called dark energy, a force that existed all around them but was invisible and untouchable. One day, they found a way to interact with it. At first, the results were small. A simple test, a small machine that could reach beyond the normal limits of energy. But then, something changed. The machine started acting on its own. It behaved in ways they did not predict. It gave off signals they did not understand. It produced patterns that did not make sense. Then, without warning, The machine created something. A tear in space, a small glowing crack in reality itself. The scientists stared in shock. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They had no idea what they had just done. The Zephyrins knew. The moment the tear appeared, the alien fleet in Earth's orbit reacted in panic. Their ships moved fast. Their warning signals blared louder than ever. A final message was sent to Earth. You have done it. You have opened the door. Stop now, before it is too late. But humanity did not stop. They did not understand the danger. They did not know what they had just awakened. And by the time they realized the truth, it was already too late. The tear in space glowed brightly, flickering like a strange flame. The scientists who had created it stood frozen in shock. They had spent years trying to control dark energy, but they never expected this. They had opened something beyond their understanding. At first, they thought it was beautiful. The tear shimmered with colors they had never seen before. It pulsed, almost like it was alive. But then, the room grew cold. The air felt heavy. A strange sound, like whispers from nowhere, filled the laboratory. One scientist, Dr. Ellis, stepped closer. He reached out his hand, his mind filled with questions. What was on the other side? Was it another universe? A new dimension? He had to know. He had to touch it. Just before his fingers met the glowing edge, an alarm blared. The Zephyrins had detected the disturbance. Their ships, which had been watching silently from orbit, rushed into action. Red warning signals flashed across Earth's skies. The alien fleet moved fast, breaking their quiet observation. A voice, urgent and filled with fear, echoed across every screen, every device, every communication system on Earth. You have gone too far. Shut it down. Shut it down now. The world froze. Governments, military leaders, and scientists all stared at their screens. The Zephyrins had warned them before, but never like this. They had never been so desperate. Inside the laboratory, the scientists scrambled to turn off the machine, but it did not stop. Dr. Ellis pressed buttons. His team flipped switches. They pulled wires. Nothing worked. The tear only grew larger. Then the whispers became voices, loud, clear voices that spoke no human language. Something was coming through. One of the scientists screamed and stumbled backward. I saw something, he gasped. Something moved inside it. The others looked closer. Shadows moved within the tear, shapes that did not belong in this world. They were not human, not alien, not anything that should exist. Then the power in the lab shut down. The lights flickered off. The machines stopped humming. The emergency alarms fell silent. Everything was quiet. The scientists held their breath. Dr. Ellis could feel his heartbeat pounding in his chest. The tear, still glowing, floated in the darkness. Then, something stepped through. A shape, blacker than night, emerged from the glowing crack in space. It had no eyes, no mouth, no face. Its body shifted like smoke, yet it cast a shadow. It was tall, impossibly thin, and it moved without making a sound. Dr. Ellis tried to scream, but no sound came out. His body refused to move. He could only watch as more shapes followed the first. Then the power came back. The lights flickered on, and the machines restarted. But the tear in space did not close. It was wide open now, and whatever had come through was here to stay. The Zephyrin response. In orbit, the Zephyrins panicked. They had been watching closely, hoping humans would listen. But now it was too late. Their leader, Vikran, sent a final message to Earth's leaders. You have done the one thing we feared. You have invited them in. We cannot fight them. You cannot fight them. There is no winning. We will leave now. If you wish to survive, do not try to stop them. Just run. The message shocked the world. The Zephyrins, who had traveled across the stars, who had the most advanced technology, were fleeing. The people of Earth had never been afraid before. They had defeated every challenge, solved every problem. But now, even the strongest among them felt a deep, cold fear. The United Nations called for an emergency response. Military forces across the world prepared their strongest weapons. The greatest scientists gathered to study the tear. Humanity would not run. Humanity would fight. But they did not understand what they were up against. The first encounter. The creatures that stepped through the tear spread quickly. They moved faster than the eye could follow. They did not attack like an army. They simply appeared wherever they wanted. In the city of Tokyo, security cameras captured one standing in the middle of a crowded street. People walked past it, not seeing it at first. Then, one by one, they froze in place. Their bodies went stiff, their eyes blank. They did not scream. They did not run. They simply stopped moving. In New York, another creature appeared in a skyscraper. The people inside never saw it. The building went silent. The phones stopped ringing. The lights flickered, and every person inside was gone. In Moscow, soldiers opened fire on one. The bullets passed right through. The creature did not react. It did not bleed. It did not fall. Instead, it simply turned its head, and every soldier dropped dead where they stood. The world watched in horror. These were not invaders. They were not an army. They were something else. Something that did not belong in this universe. Something that should have never been let in. The Zephyrians had warned them, but humanity had not listened. And now, they would face the consequences. The world had changed. The creatures were here, and nothing could stop them. Governments tried to act quickly. Emergency meetings were held. Scientists worked day and night to study the tear in space, hoping to understand how to close it. The military prepared for war, but deep down, everyone knew this was not a war they could win. The creatures did not attack like normal enemies. They did not use weapons. They did not destroy cities with bombs or lasers. They simply appeared, and wherever they appeared, people disappeared. At first, only a few people vanished. A scientist in a locked room, a soldier standing guard, a group of workers in an office. No one heard screams. No one saw them go. They were just gone. Then, the disappearances grew worse. Whole towns fell silent overnight. Planes in the sky lost contact, and when they were found, they were empty. No pilots, no passengers, just abandoned metal drifting in the wind. A train arrived at a station with no one inside. It was as if the people had never existed. The Zephyrians had left. Their ships were gone, vanishing into deep space. They had given their last warning, and humanity had ignored it. Now, Earth was alone. The scientists' last hope. In a secret lab, hidden deep underground, Dr. Ellis and his team worked desperately. They had been the first to open the tear, and now they were the only ones trying to close it. "We need more time," one scientist shouted, frantically typing on a computer. "There is no more time." Dr. Ellis replied, "The tear is growing. If we don't stop it, the whole world will be swallowed." They had tried shutting off the machine, but it was no use. The tear had become independent. It was alive now. A young scientist, her voice shaking, whispered, "What if? What if it can't be closed? What if this is the end?" No one had an answer. Then the lab's security cameras flickered. A shadow passed by the hallway. The scientists froze. "Did you see that?" one of them asked in a whisper. Dr. Ellis grabbed the emergency radio. "Security, we need help. Something is in the building." No response. The lights flickered again. The shadows grew darker. Then the whispers began, the same whispers from the tear. One by one, the scientists looked at each other. They all realized the truth at the same time. They were no longer alone in the lab. The government's last stand. Above ground, the world was in chaos. Cities were being abandoned. People ran in every direction, trying to escape. But there was nowhere to run. The creatures were everywhere. In Washington, D.C., the president held one last meeting with his advisors. "We have to use the nuclear option," a general said. "We bomb the areas where they are strongest." "Are you insane?" a scientist shouted. "Nukes won't work. These things don't die. And what if that only makes the tear bigger?" The president, his face pale, rubbed his hands together. "Then what do you suggest?" No one had an answer. The situation was the same in every country. Leaders panicked. The military fired weapons that did nothing. Scientists screamed at each other in frustration. The creatures did not care. They did not attack. They did not speak. They did not show anger or mercy. They simply moved forward, and humanity disappeared in their presence. Then, the first great vanishing happened. In the middle of a live broadcast, millions of people watched as an entire city, London, was swallowed in an instant. One moment, it was there. The next, it was gone. The buildings, the streets, the cars, everything remained. But the people were missing. Every single human was erased. Panic turned to despair. There was no fighting this. Humanity was losing without a battle. The final choice. Deep underground, Dr. Ellis and his last remaining scientists made a choice. They had spent their entire lives pushing the limits of science. They had believed that knowledge was power. Now, they knew the truth. Some knowledge should never be found. "We can't stop the creatures," Dr. Ellis said. "But maybe we can destroy the tear." His hands trembled as he reached for the final override switch. If they did this, the lab would be destroyed. The tear might close, or it might make things worse. But they had to try. "On my count," he said. 3, 2, 1. He pulled the switch. The power core beneath the lab exploded. The world holds its breath. The explosion was massive. The ground above the lab cracked. Fire and smoke rose into the sky. The shockwave was felt for miles. And then, the tear flickered. It shrank, just a little. For the first time since it opened, the tear stopped growing. In the cities, the creatures paused. They turned their shadowed heads as if they had felt something. The governments, the military, the survivors, everyone watched. Had they done it? Had they finally stopped it? Dr. Ellis, coughing and covered in dust, barely opened his eyes. He saw the tear, still there, but smaller. "We did it," he thought. "We actually did it." Then, the tear pulsed. Once, twice. And then, before anyone could react, it exploded outward. The light spread across the sky. The earth itself shook. And as the light faded, the last sound anyone heard was the creatures whispering. They were no longer just shadows in the dark. Now, they were everywhere. The explosion of light spread across the sky, blinding the world. The ground shook as if the earth itself was breaking apart. Buildings crumbled, oceans rose, and the air burned with a strange energy that no one could understand. Then silence. For a moment, everything stopped. The creatures that had filled the world were gone. The tear in space, which had grown wider and wider, had vanished. People held their breath. Was it over? Had humanity survived? Dr. Ellis lay on the ground, his body weak and shaking. His lab was destroyed. His team was gone. He could barely open his eyes. But when he did, he saw something that made his heart stop. The sky was different. It was darker, deeper, almost like space itself had come closer to Earth. And in that sky, something moved. Not the creatures. Something worse. The new sky. Around the world, the survivors looked up. Where once there had been stars, there were now shadows. Gigantic, shifting shadows that stretched across the heavens, blocking out light. They had no shape, no form that the human mind could understand. The scientists had thought the creatures had come from the tear. But the truth was far worse. The creatures were only messengers. The real beings, the ones who had been watching, waiting, were bigger than worlds. And now, They had noticed Earth, the fading Earth. Strange things began to happen. People walked through cities that should have been full, but they were empty. The lights of New York flickered and went out. The streets of Paris became quiet, as if the city had never existed. The pyramids of Egypt crumbled into dust, erased from time. The survivors called out for their loved ones. Some of them found their families. Others found nothing. Time itself was breaking. The Earth was not just under attack. It was being erased. The last survivors. Dr. Ellis stumbled through the ruins of his lab. The sky above him twisted. The ground beneath him cracked. His hands were shaking as he picked up the last working radio. "Is anyone still alive?" he asked, his voice weak. Static. Then, a reply. "Dr. Ellis, this is General Carter. We have survivors. But the world, it's disappearing." "How many are left?" A long silence. "Not enough." Ellis closed his eyes. Humanity was almost gone. But there was still one last chance. The final plan. General Carter and his remaining soldiers gathered in a hidden bunker deep underground. Scientists, engineers, and the last leaders of Earth stood together, facing one terrible truth. The Earth was lost. "We can't fight them," Carter said. "We can't stop them. But maybe we can escape." One scientist, a young woman named Sarah, spoke up. "There is a way. We have one last ship, the Exodus. It was built for deep space travel. If we leave now, we might survive." "How many can it hold?" Ellis asked. Sarah looked down. 10,000 people, maybe less. Silence filled the room. There were still millions of people left, but only 10,000 could go. It was an impossible choice, but it had to be made. The Exodus. The ship stood ready on an abandoned launch site. It was the last hope of humanity. Families were torn apart. People begged to be let in. Soldiers were forced to push them away. There were not enough seats. There was not enough time. Dr. Ellis stood at the entrance, watching as the lucky few boarded. Children cried. Mothers held their babies close. The old and weak were left behind. It was cruel, but there was no choice. "Come with us," Sarah told Ellis. But Ellis shook his head. "I helped open the tier. I brought this upon us. I will stay." The engines roared to life. The countdown began. 3. The creatures in the sky moved closer. 2. The shadows stretched toward the ship. 1. The Earth itself began to crack. And then, the Exodus launched. The end of Earth. Dr. Ellis watched as the ship disappeared into the dark sky. He knew they would never return. Earth was no longer home. The shadows reached the ground. The last cities vanished. The oceans boiled away. The mountains crumbled. And in the final moment, as the last breath of wind passed over the empty world, the Earth was erased. A new beginning. Far away, beyond the reach of the shadows, the Exodus traveled through space. Inside, the survivors looked out at the void. Their home was gone. Their past was gone. But they were alive. "Where will we go?" a child asked. Sarah looked at the stars. Somewhere new, somewhere safe. For now, they had escaped. But the universe was vast, and the shadows were still watching.